People often ask me, they're like, are you shocked by how successful it is? And especially now, this kind of worldwide domination. They said in a meeting the other day that when this was announced that...
At 56, Pauley Perrette finally stepped out of the quiet she had chosen for years and spoke with a bluntness that shocked many and, for others, confirmed what they had long suspected. For more than a decade, she had been the bright, caffeine-fueled heart of a hit primetime drama, the lab genius with the dark hair, the quirky cups, and the fierce loyalty to the team. Outside the show's bright lights, however, the story was far messier. What the public had been told for years, that she left acting to live a calmer life, was the simple version. The more complicated story, pieced together from leaked documents, private complaints, and her own words, painted a different picture. Assaults, safety failures on set, therapy to cope, and a fear so raw it drove the woman who had put bad guys behind bars on screen to stop going to work. She was born on March 27, 1969 in New Orleans, but the South she named as home was many-headed and restless. Her father's work on the railroad made permanence impossible. By the time she reached her teens, she had lived in 14 different places. That constant moving never let her settle, but it taught her to adjust, to blend into new crowds, and to read people quickly. Those skills would later serve her in unexpected ways, as a student of criminal behavior, as an actress studying characters, and as someone who learned the value of listening carefully to what people said and what they did not. As a child, she wasn't dreaming about show business. Her imagination was drawn to the hard edges of real life, criminals, investigations, and the science that solved mysteries. While others imagined astronauts or rock stars, she chatted about joining a band, working with animals, or becoming an FBI agent. She followed that curiosity into college, gathering degrees in sociology, psychology, and criminology, and starting a master's at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. For her, fame was never the point. Understanding why people hurt others, the lack of remorse, the broken choices, drove her. That question stayed with her long after she moved into auditions and bright studios. Life was not gentle in her 20s. While studying, she worked on anything that would pay the rent, bartending at underground clubs, delivering flyers on roller skates, cooking on dinner cruise boats, and sleeping on friends' floors. In Atlanta in the 1980s, she was violently mugged, an event that left harsh marks, but also a stubborn resolve. She took that trauma and turned it into action, speaking up for victims and building empathy into the work she would do later, both on and off camera. She also developed a personal code of rebellion early on. At 15, she got her first tattoo, a bold act in the conservative, church-centered environment she'd been raised in. Over the years, she collected more, each one a tiny refusal to stay boxed in by other people's expectations. Those tattoos, and the attitude behind them, became as much a part of her identity as the roles she would later play. Her path to Hollywood was not paved with privilege. She arrived in Los Angeles in the 1990s with $71 and the kind of determination that comes from having nowhere else to go. The survival jobs kept coming. Voiceover work for a dial-in service, walking dogs along Sunset Boulevard for $5 a day, bartending, and taking small parts whenever they showed up. One of those dogs, a pit bull she rescued, became Cece, who would remain central in her life and in the way she later reacted when other dogs on set caused harm. Her break into television came by accident, overhearing a casting call in a coffee shop. From there, a small part on The Drew Carey Show opened a door that led to guest roles on Frasier and Murder One, and eventually a small but memorable part in Almost Famous. Each step taught her craft and steadied her. When she auditioned for the forensic scientist role that would make her a household name, she walked in plain clothes, jeans and a white t-shirt, and the casting team saw something raw and genuine that fit the part. Her embrace of the character's quirks, the energy, the hugs, the nervous chatter, was not an act so much as a revealing of who she already was. On screen, she became Abby, the forensic scientist who used science to find answers and who offered a moral center to the show. She didn't just memorize technical lines, she studied DNA, ballistics, and lab protocol, working with real experts to make her performance feel authentic. That dedication turned a supporting role into a fan favorite. Small things, like a cheap purple stuffed hippo that made a fart sound, captured viewers' hearts. Bit by bit, producers wrote more for her, and she appeared in every episode for years, becoming a constant in millions of living rooms. Fame came with responsibility. She used it. She supported veterans through programs that paired service dogs with people dealing with PTSD and brain injuries. Those dogs cost tens of thousands to train. She threw herself into the cause because she believed in giving dignity back to people who had given everything. A quiet webcomic she created in secret, poking affectionate fun at the lab world, funneled its ad revenue to animal shelters across the country. Publicity was not the goal. She gave quietly, repeatedly, and in ways that often went unnoticed. Her refusal to be commodified was another recurring theme. Playboy offered vast sums to photograph her. She said no twice, once in 2007 and again in 2013. For her, the image she projected, especially to young fans, mattered more than a payday. She wanted to represent strength and intelligence rather than objectification. That choice cost her nothing she couldn't afford to lose. She had something more valuable to protect. The decade of success had its triumphs. The show became a ratings powerhouse, bringing in more than 20 million viewers for key episodes and overtaking reality programs on some nights. A manufactured energy drink prop, Abby's bright red cup, even helped boost sales in real life when a convenience chain tied a promotion to the show. For viewers, she was not just a character, she was a person they wanted to trust, and many did. Behind the cameras, however, a series of incidents began to unwind the professional safety she had always relied on. In October 2016, a rescue pit bull brought to set by a fellow star attacked a crew member. The injury was severe, 15 stitches and a halt to production. The attack left physical wounds and an emotional undercurrent that never fully healed. She demanded the dog not be allowed back near other cast and crew. When her request was denied and the dog returned, she refused to be in the same scenes as the owner. A strict clause was added to her subsequent contract. She would never appear in a scene with that co-star again. Production had to be rearranged. Her scenes were shot on different days, with different crews, and editors later stitched them together to maintain the illusion of proximity. The cost in scheduling and morale was real, and it signaled a rupture that would widen. Word by word, that rupture deepened into something darker. She filed 3 safety complaints with Human Resources. She spoke publicly later, saying she had nightmares about the co-star and felt terrorized on set. She tweeted that she had endured multiple physical assaults and had been forced into silence by a powerful machine. These were not throwaway grievances, but documented complaints and private actions meant to address danger she said she faced each day. When she hired a private investigator to document safety violations, it became obvious she was building a serious case. The evidence reportedly persuaded the studio to negotiate, and according to sources, the settlement amount was in the millions. The agreement included a non-disclosure clause intended to keep the details confidential, but the existence of the settlement and the circumstances that led to it later bubbled into public view. CBS, already confronting other workplace misconduct claims at the time, chose to settle rather than risk a public fight that might expose more troubling details. The studio had faced a heavy payout to another star not long before, and the willingness to settle suggested the issues being raised were credible enough to merit quiet resolution. Yet, even after the money changed hands and confidentiality agreements were signed, the story did not vanish. Leaked documents, social media posts, and finally her own voice in a raw public message in June 2019 ensured the world would hear what she had long tried to handle privately. She had tried to return to work after the settlement. A new sitcom offered hope, a chance to show a lighter side and move on. The premiere drew millions, but the show's ratings dropped quickly, and critics were unkind. Within a season, it faded away. The network had tried to help her rebuild, but the public response and the creeping fatigue of the industry meant the comeback failed before it had a chance to flourish. By July 2020, she declared her retirement in a brief, vivid tweet. "I'm free in bright rainbow colors." She announced she would answer only to God, animals, and plants, and that her rescue dogs were her only judges. It was a defiant, poetic closure, not the slow fade some stars choose, but a full stop. Retiring did not mean retreating into inactivity. In September 2021, however, life surprised her again with a violent medical emergency. She woke to numbness on the right side of her body. What felt at first like a bad night's sleep was a massive ischemic stroke. For a day and a half, her voice was gone. Doctors told her family she might not survive past the afternoon on which she was hospitalized. When words did come back, they showed the kind of dry humor fans had come to love. "Dude, seriously?" But the recovery was long and grueling. Months of therapy, regained motor skills, and the slow return of speech tested her in ways the bright lights never had. If she had any doubts about the small miracles in her life, they were erased by one of them, her rescue dog, Rosie. During the stroke, Rosie kept pawing her and waking her up, and those moments, her team later said, made the difference between life and death. The near-death moment deepened a spiritual turn that had been gathering for years. She began visiting a Benedictine monastery twice a year, learning how to sit in silence, to pray in a way that felt true to her, and to breathe. The monks didn't demand conversion. They taught presence. She came to carry a short, simple prayer with her. "Thank you for everything, and forgive me for everything." That practice, she said, delivered quiet guidance when the world around her grew loud and messy. The retreats helped her process not only the stroke, but the trauma she had accumulated through a life lived in the bright glare of public attention and in the shadow of private pain. Her public projects after retiring were no less meaningful. She became an executive producer on a documentary celebrating a powerful cultural space, the first American gay disco that had been a lifeline during the early years of the AIDS crisis. The film offered voices that had been silenced and memories that deserved a broader audience. It premiered at a notable festival and was a celebration of community and survival, themes that had long mattered to her. Private acts of kindness also marked her later years. When a young fan named Christina, who loved the show and dreamed of meeting her, passed away shortly after her wish was granted, she quietly paid for the funeral and travel expenses for the family. The gesture was discovered only because a relative briefly mentioned it online. She never sought publicity for the act. That quiet compassion was consistent with how she chose to show up in the world, small, human, and direct. Her final legal documents, revealed during a probate filing, reinforced what had always been clear in how she lived. Animals and justice mattered most. Her estate, valued in the tens of millions, was allocated not to relatives or friends, but to no-kill animal shelters and organizations fighting wrongful convictions. 60% went to shelters, 40% went to those helping free the wrongly imprisoned. Even her final wishes were in keeping with the life she'd lived. Her ashes to be split, half scattered in a dog park, and the other half at the rescue center where she'd found her first beloved dog. People who knew her often described a paradox. On screen, she played someone who loved puzzles and lab work. Off screen, she was messy, fierce, tender, and sometimes terrified. She was a woman who would not be reduced to a single narrative. She had been brave in ways the public saw and vulnerable in ways they did not. She said she had been assaulted, silenced, and pressured to stay quiet. She pushed back, filed complaints, hired investigators, and eventually accepted a settlement that was meant to buy her safety. She walked away from offers and easy money to guard her dignity. She turned down lucrative deals to protect how young fans might see themselves reflected. When she could, she gave anonymously and fully to causes she believed in. When she survived a stroke, she found a kind of grace in the small things. A dog that would not stop pawing her awake, a monastery that taught her silence, and a simple prayer that felt like a friend. Her final public pronouncements were succinct. She was done with acting, done with the industry that had taken so much of her and given so much in return, and profoundly devoted to the companions who had kept her alive, the animals she rescued, and the people who quietly fought for justice. Her story, as she told it, was not only about the harms she suffered, but about the choices she made afterward to protect herself, to help others, and to live by a set of priorities that were messy and right. In the end, the revelation that a beloved star had been terrified of a co-star, had filed complaints, had received a multi-million-dollar settlement, and had stepped away from fame for peace was both a rating-grabbing headline and a human story about boundaries and survival. The leaked documents and her own admissions reconfigured the tidy tale many fans had been told. The simple explanation that she wanted a quieter life was true in part, but she also made that choice from a place of necessity. She had been frightened, she had been hurt, and she had chosen to walk away. Her life after the show was marked by hard choices and quiet generosity. She refused offers that seemed to cheapen what she stood for. She used the proceeds she had, quietly and methodically, to help animals and people wronged by the system. And she crafted a legacy that refused drama in favor of care. When her will was made public, the tone was unmistakable. She wanted the money she had earned to protect creatures and people who could not protect themselves. Even in death, she wanted to be divided between a dog park and a rescue center, a final act of deliberate, tender symbolism that said everything she believed about compassion. What she left behind was complicated and ultimately human. A beloved television character, a woman who loved animals and used her platform for quiet good, a survivor who fought to be heard, a person who, at 56, decided that silence no longer served her and that the truth, however messy and painful, needed telling. Whether people agreed with her words or not, they had to reckon with them. Her confession was not a neat ending. It was a summons for accountability, for better protection on sets, and for attention to the small acts that either protect or endanger us in our workplaces. It was also a reminder that public figures are people first, flawed, brave, frightened, and capable of great kindness. She had spent years building a life that stitched together science, humor, compassion, and protest. She walked away from stages and scripts, yes, but not from purpose. In the quiet after retirement, she found new ways to be seen. She found a monastery, a prayer, dogs that saved her, and causes that mattered. She told the world what she had endured and, in doing so, rewrote the story that had been told about her departure. At 56, she finally confirmed the rumors, not as gossip, of someone who had chosen truth over silence and peace over performance.